there, it's Chrissy. I'm coming to you live from Denver, Colorado, and today I wanted to talk about OCD as usual, but the specific theme I wanted to talk about today was health OCD. Again, OCD is OCD, but oftentimes people have different themes, and a lot of time people will have the health theme or mental health diagnosis theme. Now, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer before this. Any of the fears that people have with OCD, this doesn't mean that they're necessarily against what they're fearing or that they feel like it is wrong. This is just something that creates anxiety for whatever reason. I often say there is no rhyme or reason why we get the themes that we do, and to try to figure out the meaning or even figure out why we have them in a way of, but I don't think it's wrong or I don't think it's bad, you're still giving into OCD. Nobody knows why you get the types of themes that you do, so trying to figure that out sometimes can make things worse. So the disclaimer is, I'm going to talk about things in this video today that you may think to yourself, well, there's nothing wrong if I have this health diagnosis. Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to show you that sometimes people can have a fear of it with anxiety associated, and it becomes really blown up in their mind and they become fearful of it, and then the only focus is on the diagnosis. So now we've got that over, let's move on. So health fears and even mental health diagnosis can be absolutely a part of OCD and can take over someone's life. And again, just like I said, it's because anxiety is associated with it. So oftentimes, and okay, this isn't a health thing, but you know, I've talked about this before, I have the fear of vomiting. And so that's tied to a lot of illnesses. And so oftentimes if I hear, okay, for example, if I hear something on, again, 20, 20, or 60 Minutes, the bane of OCD's existence, because it's just fear mongering. If I hear something about there's this disease and one of the symptoms is vomiting, I'll be like, maybe I should go WebMD it and see if I have it, because I certainly don't want to vomit. I mean, come on, it will rabbit hole all the way back to that. And that's just how OCD is. So, let's just face it. Everybody has some sort of fear attached to getting some sort of health issue, or even like a mental health issue, because we all just want to be normal and perfect, right? But as 99.9999, well, let's just say it, 100% of us, we all know no one's perfect. Everybody has to deal with stuff in their life. And so we, as those of us with OCD, and if you don't know what OCD is, you may think OCD is just organizational, or it's just washing your hands and things like that. And it's not. It can evolve to things like health. It can evolve to things like sexual, violent, intrusive thoughts. And so what happens when someone has OCD is they will have these normal fears, or a normal, maybe intrusive thought of, oh, I just watched an expose on AIDS and they said that they had the symptoms, and I have had rapid weight loss lately, or I've had headaches, so maybe I have a brain tumor. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're on Google and you're looking up all the symptoms of a brain tumor, and before you know it, you have self-diagnosed and your entire world gets wrapped up in those symptoms. I'm telling you, it happens to me, it happens to most of us with OCD, and this is how health OCD can absolutely get out of control. So most of the common ones that I see, and that if I don't mention it, it doesn't mean that yours isn't, but as a peer support and consultant and meeting with people worldwide, most of the common ones I see, AIDS is a big one. And again, this is not stigmatizing AIDS. This is a lot of it because there was just such a fear of it, for so long, because there wasn't a cure, but also, just the transmission and how there were all these myths out there about how it could be transmitted, and it's like, oh my God, I touched a doorknob and I got AIDS now, or whatever. But it doesn't matter, because when you hear something attached way back in the day to not having a cure, all of a sudden it can create anxiety. And so the fear of AIDS is a really common one that I see, and that I have actually also experienced. Now, this was a brief period for me, but I was going through a really stressful time, perpetual stress. It was probably, I think it was right around 2014 or 15. And I usually, my immune system drops. I get sick a lot when I have perpetual stress. And I got sick once a month for 4 months in a row, meaning I just had a really bad cold, and a couple of those times it was almost flu-like symptoms. And of course, after month 4, my mind went to, if my immune system is compromised, that must mean that I have AIDS. Well, let me tell you something. I Googled for 6 hours, starting at 7 a.m. when I first had the intrusive thought. By 4 p.m., I was at Planned Parenthood getting an AIDS test with a fever. And the girl's like, after she got all my history, she's like, I really don't think that the test is necessary. And I'm like, do it. So we take the AIDS test. And then of course it was like, I think it was the Swabby test. I can't remember, but I couldn't get the results for a while. And I was like, I think you should do a second one just in case. And she was like, why? And I said, well, what if you lose that one? I mean, really? Like, I'm sure she was like, girl, get the F out of my office. But I remember leaving there, and then I thought, oh, I feel like this is OCD, so I did some ERP around it. And by the time I got the results back, I was over the anxiety because I did ERP. But it just goes to show how easy it is to get caught up, because anxiety makes you feel the urgency. I've got to know now. And the damn AIDS tests take so long to come back, or at least they did back then. And so it just makes things worse, because then anxiety will amp. Other things, fear of having cancer is always a big one. And oftentimes you can start to manifest symptoms when you're having things like this. So you may think to yourself, well, I've had a headache for 3 days. I must have a brain tumor. And then you go on and you're looking up symptoms of brain tumor, boom, headache. And you're like, oh, I have cancer of the brain. I need to go get a brain scan. And again, like, I'm totally not making fun. Hello, I've done this before. And I have had injuries before where I have had multiple MRIs because I did not believe the first MRI was correct. I mean, it's ridiculous. Those are expensive compulsions, by the way. The latest one, of course, last year was the flu. The flu was so huge, y'all, because you have all of these stories across the world going, oh, this person's died and this and that. And all of a sudden people are freaking out. I was talking about this with someone I was meeting with a few days ago. And it was like, I mean, do I need to wear a mask everywhere? I mean, what am I? And so it just really burrows into you. And it feels like there really is no escape. And I'm going to tell you, there's no amount of Googling that you can do to make you feel better. There's no amount of asking people what they think. And oftentimes, there's no amount of going to doctors that can help, because it is OCD. And remember, with OCD, there is no logic. There is no answer. You have to be able to be okay and then certainty. And that's what makes it so hard. Now, the next subject I want to talk about, and by the way, the health OCD can span anything and everything. And we're talking about multiple sclerosis. And I have spoken to someone recently who actually began to manifest symptoms of these. And so all of a sudden, first of all, you don't want to think to yourself that anxiety can produce these types of things, but they can. But it feels scary to think that your brain is that powerful that can actually manifest symptoms. So I do want to also make sure that you give yourself some self-love, because if you are manifesting symptoms and then you find out that that's not something that you've dealt with, that you're dealing with, and you realize it's anxiety, there is that moment that you just think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And am I stupid? And am I weak? And whatever else. But no, you are not, because anxiety is a health issue. And at times, so much more powerful than anyone gives it credit. So yes, you are still suffering, and you still have reason to seek treatment, and you still have reason to get self-compassion and compassion from others and love for what you're going through, because it is suffering. Sorry, that was a little tangent, but I just want you to know that. Other things too, huge will be sexually transmitted diseases. I mean, TMI, but I can't tell you, how many times, especially like in college, or fear of am I pregnant or whatever else. I would, oh my God, this is too TMI. I can't believe I'm going to say this, But like, you have sex with someone and then like, I don't know, like a couple days later, you're like, oh, I have a bump, or oh, I'm itchy. I should just turn this off now. But you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, did I just get gonorrhea? Or whatever else. Whatever else itches. And then of course, the more that you focus on whether something is itchy or there's a bump or whatever, then all of a sudden it's just like you have measles down there. And this is not, like, I'm probably like all red. This is not saying that having a sexual transmitted disease is wrong or whatever else, but I'm just letting you know that anxiety can produce all of these things. And this is very common and you are not alone. Okay, let's move on from that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the diagnosis and the fear of diagnosing with mental health issues. Now, I have not done a video on this on purpose. And not on purpose, but I just haven't known how to do it. Because I know that there is a number of people out there that experience the fear of psychosis, the fear of developing schizophrenia, the fear of developing bipolar. And I wasn't sure how to, as an advocate for mental health, do a video that isn't portraying that it's wrong or bad to have these diagnoses. So I hope that you understand what I mean. The only way that I can really compare it to was when I first came out with my story about having homosexual themed OCD, which means I had this fear that I was going to turn gay. I have nothing against individuals who are homosexuals, oh my God, at all. And in fact, when I was going through it, I was like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, if I'm gay, but I just don't want vagina. Like, the end, and I can't stop it. And I remember coming out with the story and thinking, what if people who are gay think that I think it's wrong, or they think that I think it's bad? And that is not the case. It is just, I had a fear of something that I knew was not part of who I was or my desires or wants. And all of a sudden, I couldn't get it out of my head. And so I had that feeling, and I have that same feeling when it comes to mental health diagnosis. Why? Because I work with people who have bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or psychosis. And while I worked in the state institution here especially, I learned so much about psychosis and schizophrenia especially. And I just, because I didn't know anything about it before, and then getting to meet the individuals that were living with it, my entire worldview and lens changed about it. They are some of the most wonderful people I've ever met, and their stories are amazing. And I have feared doing a video about it because I don't want people to think that I think that it's something that's wrong, or if it'll be horrible if you have it for the rest of your life. But I also have to honor a part of OCD, which this is, and Matt Miles was the one that opened my eyes to it, although I didn't want to give him credit when he opened my eyes to it before. But he said, when I was telling him about it, and I was working with a client, this was a long time ago, and it was one of the first times I encountered someone that had the fear of schizophrenia and psychosis. And I told Matt, I said, I'm having a really hard time because I'm having a hard time empathizing, because I empathize so much with individuals who live with this. And he said, well, Chrissy, what would you feel like if someone said that about you with HOCD? These people, it's an anxiety disorder. It's not the actual feelings they have about it. And I was like, oh. And then I went, well, I don't care. I didn't really. But I just was like, okay, I get it. But I needed to be ready to talk about it. So here I am, and I'm ready to talk about it. What this means is individuals who are living with OCD, they develop anxiety around the what if I develop a mental health diagnosis. And a lot of times, I'm just going to be honest, that shit is fueled by the media. Oftentimes it's, people with mental health diagnosis are portrayed as violent and horrible in the media and this and that, and if it wasn't for that and all these drugs and whatever else. And so people see these things, and even if they don't know the facts about them, or even if they do, it can develop into an intrusive thought accompanied by anxiety. And at that point, that does not mean that people think to themselves, oh, well, all people with schizophrenia or who are living with schizophrenia are bad, or bipolar are bad. That is not it. The same way, you know, not that people with OCD would worry that people with OCD are bad, but at the same time, it is a mental health diagnosis just like OCD is. And so I want to emphasize that it is the fear. Now, what can happen is people will hear something in the media, or they'll read something, or they see things, and this is often the case, of schizophrenia may develop in the 20s. And so people will often get this fear thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in my 20s. And what if it is? And again, just like health symptoms, people will think to themselves, well, I can start to manifest symptoms. So I think I may have seen something. I think I may have heard something. And all of a sudden it's, am I in a state of psychosis? And I'm so worried I'm in a state of psychosis. And then it would happen of either A, I want to go get checked out by a mental health professional, or B, I do not want to get checked out by a mental health professional because I don't want to hear the truth. So it can be kind of like that weird slippery slope of what do you do? So I can't give advice because that is not my job. One of the things I always try to help people remember is, if you are having symptoms of, I'm worried that I may develop another mental health diagnosis, etc. If you've had another one, compare your pattern of behavior. Is it the same as it was with another OCD symptom? Because as all of us know, when you're in one type of OCD, we always think, oh, what, the other one would be so easy, which it's so not, by the way, because anxiety is anxiety. But you think back and go, oh, if I could only have that type again, that was so easy, or whatever. But this is a crucial moment of being able to discover something about your OCD. Find your pattern. And if your pattern is consistent, it's likely it is OCD. And that was not reassurance. I'm just telling you what I use when I actually think to myself, maybe I don't have OCD this time, and maybe I am just, you know, I'm having sexual intrusive thoughts and they're real, or I'm this or that. My pattern always stays the same. I always feel the same way. It's always the same symptoms, even though OCD is changing. So these are very common themes with OCD, and you can absolutely manifest symptoms. Going to see a mental health professional can oftentimes become another way of, I'm going to go get, you know, multiple AIDS tests, and I'm not going to believe the results anyway. So if you're suspecting that it's OCD, I would highly suggest seeing an OCD specialist. If that specialist, this might trigger you, and sorry if it does, but I'm just being honest, if that OCD specialist believes that this isn't, and that you may need to seek help from another mental health specialist, they will be able to recognize that, and they'll also be able to recognize if it's OCD. They are trained professionals. So with that, and thank you for letting me explain it, by the way, because it has taken me a long time to be able to put that out there, because I didn't want to, as a mental health advocate, feel like I was coming across as stigmatizing illnesses that I have worked with people and that I feel like there is something to be feared. Now, I know when you have anxiety, it is to be feared, but you're only fearing the anxiety. You're not really actually fearing the fear. It's just the anxiety surrounding it. Food for thought. Okay, so when you are having health and mental health OCD thoughts, and you think to yourself, well, I need to go see 8,000 professionals and not believe any of them. You suspect it might be OCD, and one of those suspicions could be confirmed with, well, this might be OCD, but I don't think it is this time. How about this? Stop worrying about the symptoms that you believe you have and worry about the symptoms of the thing that it actually is. Anxiety. That was my cat, by the way. If you just heard a meow right after I said that, it was almost perfectly timed. Anyway, anxiety is a huge symptom. Anxiety is crippling. Anxiety is something to get treated for. Even if you really believe in your heart of hearts this is not anxiety, go see a specialist and and trust them. I mean, OCD specialist. It needs to be an OCD specialist, by the way. Which if you need help finding someone, please feel free to write me and I can help you find someone. Anxiety is something that is just as powerful as any other illness, yet it is so much easier to deny. Please do not underestimate the power that anxiety has over our bodies and our brains and our quality of life. As you've seen most of my videos, if anxiety with sexual intrusive thoughts can manifest your groin to move, okay? It can manifest just about anything. That is an important reminder. Our brains are the most powerful organ in the body, and anxiety is just the fire that fuels the brain to do almost anything to make you believe that. Okay, so a couple things before I wrap up. Number one, get off WebMD already. I mean, stop. Googling is your worst enemy when it comes to these things, okay? It's your worst enemy. You're going to Google for hours and hours and hours, and you may actually feel better, and then you'll stop Googling, and you'll be like, but I read this one thing, and now I feel like I have a lump right here in my throat, so that could really mean, okay, it's always going to be that way. Get off WebMD already. That is like the worst site ever for OCD. I hate it. It's tough because it's a compulsion and it makes you feel better, but it also can make you feel worse. How about this? Get off WebMD and start Googling psychologists that do ERP to help treat OCD. How about that? That is an alternative, and commit to that. Or write to me and we can do a consultation and I can help find someone in your area. How about that? Okay, don't hate. Here's the second thing. I'm so sorry, and you're going to hate me, and then you're going to be like, I'm never going to watch Chrissy's videos again. Maybe you do have the illness. Maybe you do have another mental health diagnosis. If you do, you'll deal. You'll deal with it. The same way you have the OCD diagnosis and you're going to deal with it, and you should be dealing with it, or you could be dealing with it. Maybe you do. Chances are any of us and all of us are going to get some sort of health ailment in our life. When we do, it actually isn't going to affect kind of our next, we're not going to have anxiety about it. It's just going to be, what do I do with the next steps? What do I do now? Okay, I'm going to see this doctor and this and this and this. If you're seeing 3, 4, 5 doctors and they're all saying the same thing, or if you're seeing psychologist after psychologist and they're all saying the same thing and you're choosing not to believe them, there's only so much time you can beat your head up against the wall and still blame the wall. So, you might have a health diagnosis or another mental health diagnosis. And if you do, you will deal with it. The same way, I have OCD and I deal with it. And sometimes I deal with it better than others. That is a fact. But I've also had health diagnoses. I've also had injuries. I have dealt with them. And that's what we do as humans. Recognize when the anxiety has created this huge fire around it and there's so much fear. Facing the fear is finding out if you do or you don't, trusting the result, moving on. And by the way, I'm not saying do a compulsion. and go visit a ton of doctors, but you know what I'm saying. If you do, you'll deal. Lastly, the urgency of having health or mental health diagnosis, the fear of having health or the fear of having mental health diagnosis, there is an urgency attached. Why? Because your brain will be like, oh, you got to find out now, because the life expectancy of this type of cancer is only 4 months. So you better find out now. And those 4 MRIs I had, those weren't accurate. The urgency and the urge is part of anxiety. Okay? Urgency, urge is in that word. So you're going to feel this need to, I need to know today. Well, you know what? Most tests don't come back today, so you're going to have to sit in it anyway. So you might as well sit in it for a while and ERP some stuff around it, or know that the anxiety is going to be there, or you could contact a professional and get some help. The thing, so one of the tips I always think of, and trust me, this comes up for me too. And so it's not like I'm sitting here going, oh, you should do this and look at me. I get this a lot, and especially around injuries. And if you've seen a lot of my videos, you know that I struggle with this in regards to injuries and stuff like that. And especially around lady parts and stuff, I always worry something bad's going to happen down there. So, you know, I need to go get something checked out, and oh my gosh, there was a movement or whatever, and who even knows anymore if it's the groin or not. Like, there was something, but I need to get it checked out, and it's going to be bad. And so here's the thing. I treat it kind of like I do and maybe you think I'm a bad pet owner or whatever, but like I treat it like I do my pet. So if my pet, Hamilton, if he's sick, so if he's vomiting or something, I think to myself, okay, I'm going to give it a week and then reassess. Okay, so if he's not still vomiting and he's okay, I'm not going to go into urgency mode to be like, I need to take him to the vet because he vomited 3 times. You know, I'm going to wait a few days, just like you would when you have a child and they have a cold, or maybe the flu, or maybe not the flu this year, for goodness sake. I totally just contradicted what I said earlier, but whatever. I use that analogy on myself. If I'm super worried about something, and I will know I'll suspect it's OCD. I'll never really believe it's OCD because I just think maybe I don't even have OCD and I'm this horrible person that has all these symptoms. But anyway, if I suspect that I have something and there's this urgency, I think to myself, I'm going to wait a week and then I'll reassess. If I feel like there are still symptoms, if I feel like there's something, then maybe I'll reassess. That doesn't mean running to the doctor. That means I will reassess. At the same time, I'm reassessing my anxiety levels, meaning, are my symptoms congruent with any other intrusive thought that I have? If they are, it is hugely likely that this is OCD. Now, I also want to, and this is going to be hard to say because it's totally, I feel like might discredit everything I've said. But like, if you're truly having like symptoms and you feel like if you wait a week or whatever, and then you go get checked out and a doctor's like, no, everything's cool or whatever. Yes, I want you to trust the professionals. Of course, trust the professionals. You know, but obviously if you are having, you know, a rash or something, you know, for 5 months with big welts all over you, definitely go get checked out. But I also, so it's like it's a slippery slope because you want to disclose to an MD or somewhere that you're going, you want to disclose that you have anxiety and OCD. That also feels like it can work against you and it can stigmatize you. So I'm just going to be honest. I had some stress stuff going on one time and I was having physical symptoms because of the stress. And because they knew about my diagnosis and a suicide attempt, they alluded to the fact, well, this is all in your head. And I really did want to get up and strangle the girl that said that. And that was not an intrusive thought. But in hindsight, yes, there was a lot of stress involved. Now, I finally went to, you know, after another month, I did go to someone that was able to say, this is stress management. You know, what can I do to support you in finding the right tools or X, Y, and Z? So the bottom line, This is a huge theme when it comes to OCD. And you have to be very careful about, I'm going to go to the doctor, and if the doctor doesn't say what I want them to say, I'm going to go to another doctor, and then I'm going to go to another, and then I'm going to go to another. Because this is something that we want some answer, and it's bizarre, but OCD always wants to point us to the worst case scenario, right? And so if we're not actually getting the proof of the worst case scenario, we're like, I'm going to find the proof of the worst case scenario. There is no proof. There is no proof when it comes to anxiety. And sometimes the proof points to it is anxiety. So the bottom line is, go see an OCD specialist. Talk to them about this. Get their opinion about this. Get their support and see what they can do to help you. They are going to be someone that can way better analyze this and help either get you some therapy for what's going on with you, or say, maybe you need to see somebody else. But consult the professional that has to do with your actual illness that you know you have, because please never underestimate how powerful anxiety is. Lastly, you are not alone. You are not crazy. Okay? And I don't mean that in a non-strength-based way, but oftentimes when people are feeling like they are having symptoms of health or mental health diagnosis, they feel like, oh my God, but I'm manifesting symptoms. I must be crazy. Like it just feels so wild. Okay, but this is part of having anxiety, self-love and self-compassion. And lastly, I'm going to emphasize one more time. You can get help for anxiety. This is a serious health issue, anxiety. And you can get help for it. Help is available. I can help you with that. I do consulting, and I also do peer support to help individuals. Peer support is to help normalize what you're going through and the emotional turmoil. Consulting is to help find resources and referrals in your area. Go to ChrissyHodges.com to find out more about my pricing and my services. Also, follow me on Instagram at PureOChrissy. I'm loving Instagram. And so I've been posting a lot of stuff about OCD and just mental health in general. And every 5 days a week, I do a podcast, Coffee with Chrissy, at buzzsprout.com. It's about 5 to 7 minute messages in the morning. And, they're just fun, little intimate, talks about mental health and the struggles sometimes and the triumphs and what it's like to live with a mental illness and live in recovery. So, and the struggles that come along with that as well. So anyway, thank you. And I hope this was helpful to you. And if you need some support, please don't hesitate to reach out. OCD.CHRISSIE@gmail.com.